How do you apply this cracked texture on any surface on Photoshop? That's coming up in today's video. So the first thing we need to do is find some images of cracked texture. And the best place to find these types of images is this website called pixels.com. This is a great website to find copyright-free images and videos for your business, for your projects, anything that you want. And I just searched up cracked texture and all of these images came up here. So we're going to use a few of these images and see which one works best with this image here. So I saw this one here before, and let's just try this one because it's a high quality and a good resolution image. So let's just right click and copy this image, and let's go into Photoshop and just go Control V, press Control V or Command V if you're on a Mac, or you can go Edit, Paste. And I'm also going to resize this image just slightly. So you can press Control T or Command T if you're on a Mac, or you can just go Edit, Free Transform right here. So if you hold Shift, you can resize this image and keep the proportions of this image as you resize it. If you don't hold Shift, the image will become disproportionate. So you don't want that. So you want to keep the proportions of this image. So I'm going to resize this image just about to the size of her face, but you don't have to be perfectly accurate. And I'm going to hit Enter. So next I'm going to rename this image Texture or Original Texture. Original Texture. So next I'm just going to lower the opacity of this texture layer by clicking on the Original Texture layer and lowering it to about, I would say just about 50 to 60%. So it should be just enough so you can see the face, and but not low enough but high enough so you can see the texture layer. Next then you just go to Edit and go to Transform and choose Warp. So this is a different type of free transform where you can actually bend the image. So we're going to slightly bend this image like closer and closer to the face. So we're just going to get that outline of the face. This doesn't need to be perfectly accurate. We just need to kind of get that outline just there. So let's push this back here. So there's these little lines that you can play around with just to make things a bit more accurate. And yeah, that looks pretty good around here. And there we go. That looks good. So now I'm just going to hit Enter, and I'm going to up the opacity a little bit, and you can already see the texture starting to wrap around her face. So let's just lower it back to 55%. And I'm going to choose the Original Texture layer and go to Filter and click on Liquify right here. And there's a few options that you get right here on the right hand side. So under the Show Backdrops section, make sure it's actually ticked on, and make the opacity around I would say about 60%, as long as you can kind of see the background. And right here where it says Use, I'm going to choose Portrait, because the only layer that I want to see, the backdrop layer that I want to see, is the Portrait layer, which is the subject layer. And we just have the texture to work with now. And this is where you start to wrap around the texture around her nose, around her eyes, and eyebrow ridges and things like that. So this is a really fun tool to play around with. So there's a few tools right here we're going to play with. One is called the Blow tool, the Pucker tool, and the Forward tool. So let's start with the Blow tool right here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to her nose. So the nose should be kind of coming out right here. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to choose the Blow tool, and I'm just going to make it come out just a little bit right here. And maybe it should be wrapping going inwards around the nose's ridge at the top. So I'm going to choose the Pucker tool and just make it go inwards right here. And maybe around just the inside of her eyes, it should be going in further. So let's wrap those all in. And maybe around here as well, it should be going in even further. So let's wrap all of those bits right here. So all of those look good, and let's make it bloat a little bit more. I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller. There we go, that looks good. And around here as well, and let's make the brush a little bit smaller here as well. There we go. So that looks pretty good. So now let's do a little bit more around her cheeks. So this would take a while, but it will look really good once it's all done. So we can kind of push this all into her jaws. You can see what it would look like as well. Just get an idea of what it would look like as well after it's all done. So let's just keep pushing all of these in. Maybe around her forehead as well. You can push all of those in as well. So you just need to get a good idea of what you think this texture would look like around her face, and kind of go off of your own intuition. Cool. So let's make a bloat a little bit right here. So you need to make the brush a bit bigger here, maybe here as well, and maybe around her chin should be a little bit bigger, and maybe around her lips just slightly bigger here as well. There we go, that looks good. And maybe around just the bottom of her nose, it should be slightly smaller as well. So just around here, it should be smaller. Cool, so that looks, I think that looks good so far. We can't really tell until we kind of hit OK. So I'm gonna hit OK and see what this looks like. And I'm gonna up the opacity a little bit, and you can slightly see what we've created, but still we can play around with it a little bit more. But you can also give it an effect like multiply right here. So I'm gonna give this original texture layer an effect of multiply. Let's up the opacity a little bit, and you can see now it's starting to kind of wrap around her face now. So we can play around with the Liquify tool a little bit more now. I usually kind of do it about 3 times until I get the exact effect that I want. And again, I'm going to choose the layer to be portrait, the background layer. And again, I'm going to play around with some of these other tools now, like the forward tool. So we can kind of push this back and forward. Just make it wrap around just her face. There we go, so that looks good. And maybe you want some of these lips parts to kind of maybe move upwards a little bit. And also I'm going to wrap it, maybe make these bits a little bit bigger. And these bits a little bit smaller, like here. Yep, that looks good. And let's make the eyebrow ridges a bit bigger. I think it will look a bit better if I make it a little bit bigger. So you're kind of experimenting with all of this. You're not exactly sure what it would look like after you actually hit OK. But then you kind of have to go back and forth until you get it just right. So let's keep going here. So I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger here as well, and I'm going to keep making it smaller around these other areas. So now it's starting to come together, I think. So when I first start, I usually like zoom in and go into more of the details, and then when I'm starting to get it together, I kind of zoom out a little bit and then go for the kind of finishing touches. So let's push this in a little bit. Go right here. Push it back just around those jaw lines. Get it just right. Cool, so I think that looks good. So let's just hit OK. Yep, so that looks much better now. So we kind of have that cracked texture look. So let's zoom out a little bit, and now you can start playing around with where you actually want these cracked textures to be. So we don't really want the texture to be going over her hair, her eyebrows, her eyelashes, and her nostrils and things like that. So we actually want to get rid of those parts right here. So instead of just erasing or deleting those parts, we're going to hide those parts. So if we make a mistake, if we delete something that we needed, we can just get it back. So if we delete it or erase it, we can't get it back. So the way you hide parts of this image is with the masking tool on the bottom right hand corner here. It's this little icon with a circle and a square. So make sure you have the original texture selected and click on this circle and the square icon, which is the masking tool icon. This extra box will pop up just next to the original texture layer. So this is white box. Now watch what happens when I choose the white box by clicking on it, and when I take a paintbrush tool and I just paint across the screen. So you can see a part of it got erased like this, and you can also see a black line. I'm not sure if you can see that, it's really small, but it's a black line going across that white box that represents the line that I just drew across the screen. So we just hid anything that's black in that white box is hidden, and anything that's white is revealed. And we can also choose a gray color. So the darker the black, or the darker the color, the more it hides, and the lighter the color, the more it reveals. So I've got a gray colored one now, and you can see it just it only hides a part of it. So let's just undo that by pressing Ctrl Z or Command Z if you're on a Mac, or you can just choose a white color, and I can just bring that all back. So I'm just going to bring that all back with the white color. So now you can see most of those black lines are gone now. So what I'm going to do is choose a black color, and I'm going to hide all of these cracks around her eyebrows. So I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller, and I'm also going to make the brush's thickness to be about 50%. I mean the hardness of the brush to be about 50%. So we kind of have that rough but kind of a smooth edge as well. And let's just hide these bits around here. So don't worry about the colors too much, the unmatching colors. We're going to make the colors match later on towards this video. So let's just keep going here by getting rid of these cracks on the eyebrows. Yep, so that's starting to look good. So let's get rid of these cracks on the eyelashes. There we go, and these eyelashes too. That looks good. And let's also get rid of the cracks in the nostrils, and this nostril as well, and maybe even somewhere around the lips. You don't want, like the teeth and things, so you don't want any cracks going into the teeth, and maybe you don't want the cracks to be connecting with the upper lips, so you want to get rid of some of those cracks there as well. So this really depends on what kind of image you used as well. So your image might look slightly different. So let's just zoom out, see what this looks like so far. And we also need to do the hair part at the top right here as well. So let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Cool, that looks good. Yep, that looks really good around there. Right, okay. So it looks good. So let's zoom out. We've pretty much got the image now. So what we can do now is just kind of match the colors. Like it still kind of looks like just a mask just wrapped around her face. So if you want to make the colors kind of match, we're gonna have to use some of these tools right here under the selective color tool or the hue and saturation tool. There's heaps of options here, and we're gonna go through some of them. So first, let's match this texture color with the color of a skin tone. So to do that, just select the original texture layer, go to Image, Adjustments, and then click on Selective Color. So there's so many different options here, but you can play around with these other options as well. But usually I go for Selective Color. So you have to choose what kind of color exists most on this image right here. So you have a few options here. There's reds. You can choose the reds from this texture, the yellows, the blues, and all of that. So there's a bit of red and there's a bit of yellow. So first, let's just start with red, and let's try changing the reds in this texture. So if you just play around with this graph, you can start seeing the color change. So it's turned a little bit yellow, and you can see it's starting to blend in. So now it's really, when we turn down the yellows, it's really blended in to the skin tone now. And if before it looked like this, now it looks like this. So I'm not sure if you can notice the difference, but it's slightly the textured color is slightly lowered. Let's lower the black a little bit more. There we go. So that's pretty good. So now let's choose yellow, and let's play around with that now. So let's see how much we can change with the yellows. So that's getting a bit darker here. So I can't exactly predict what it will look like when I choose different colors, but you can only just play around with these different colors and see what it would look like. Now next, the other one that I play around with is neutral. So this just changes all the colors within this texture. So let's play around with this, and you can see this is a bit more extreme. It just changes all of the colors all at once. So it turns a bit more green. So let's lower that just a little bit. Maybe make it slightly darker. And you can even just get rid of it completely like that, but we don't want that. So let's make it slightly lowered there. Yep, and then that looks pretty good. So before it looked like this, now it's a bit more blended in. So it kind of matches the skin tone a little bit more. So let's click on OK, and that looks good. So now we can match the colors even more. So if you choose this icon on the bottom right hand side, there's another option called selective color, which will select all the colors within this layer and the portrait layer, and we can change that. Or we can use the hue and saturation tool and the contrast and brightness tool. There's so many different ones, but let's just try hue and saturation. So with this one, this graph will pop up, and you can play around with this now. So you can see the color changes quite a bit. So I think that looks pretty good there. There's a bit less color there now, but the contrast increases a bit more. So it looks good. Yeah, I think I like it there now. Now if I want to increase the contrast a little bit and the brightness, because it looks a bit dark now, I can just go back down to that icon and choose brightness and contrast. Let's increase the brightness a little bit and also increase the contrast a little bit so we can see the cracks on the faces more as well. There we go. So I think that looks pretty good now. So we've kind of really got that nice texture now. So at this point, you can keep playing around with the color selection tools, not just the ones that I've shown you. There's so many other options like black and white, photo filters, color balance, and I encourage you to play with all of these here, and you can get so many different looks going on. So you can also add in more textures. So you can add in other detailed textures if you wanted to. If you're looking for like a skin ripping texture, you can just search up ripping texture on pixels.com and you can apply that to this face. But that's how easy it is to apply this type of effect on Photoshop. So if you have any questions, you can comment down below, and if you have any other suggestions on videos that you want me to make, just comment down below and I'll try and make a video on that. But that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.